Crossroads is there. It is now.
Is it still there?
No.
Crossroads is there. It's still called the Crossroads, but it is a rap, hip hop,
Jamaican place.
Jamaican.
Okay, yeah. I had a band that played there in the 80s. Was it always a... How long does the rap and hip-hop legacy go back for that club?
I know exactly when it came in. I just couldn't tell you off the top of my head. It was probably in the, I think it was 95, mid-90s.
Oh, okay, that would make sense then. Yeah.
Mid-90s. But I mean, Blaze Starr used to be like the house stripper there for years and years. And they went through all these different changes. You know, George Saslaw took it over. He was running the Crosstown Lounge in Mount Pleasant in the late 50s, and then he took over the Crossroads in 61 and turned it into a country music roadhouse. And then they kind of switched over in the late 60s. They brought in Roy Buchanan, and who started playing guitar there. You know, Roy Buchanan, the Snake Stretchers, and then in the 70s they were back and forth between country and rock and roll.
Well, that makes
Anything else? Somebody had their hand up?
I did before. I was wanted to ask what happened to
perfect sense.
Yeah.
With the Beat Coffee House phenomena, what about the campuses, college campuses? Were there any on-campus variation, versions of these things?
I tell you, the college campuses were extremely conservative up until the late 60s. University of Maryland, I mean, they didn't even let Timothy Leary come in and do a lecture in 1966. They barred him from the campus. I think he had to go to American University. I mean, there was an uproar over anything. It was very difficult. They did one of the first rock and roll shows at Ritchie Coliseum in College Park in December of '58. It was Bill Haley and his Comets and Terry and the Pirates and Jerry Dallman and the Nightcaps and all these other bands.
That was a big venue for something like that.
The Diamondback wouldn't advertise it.
Elvis played there too, you know. I
Who did?
believe. Oh, he played at the University of Maryland Armory.
Who's that?
Elvis
Presley played Cole Field.
Cole Fieldhouse, that's right.
Yeah.
That was in the 70s.
That was in the 70s.
Yeah, when the Beat generation was at its strongest in '59 to '61, I never found any references to anything like that on college campuses. It's not to say it's not there, but I did. You know,
There's all kinds of similar stuff in, like you say, the late '60s and all of the hippie.
We had a record hop at Maryland in the early '60s. At the University of Maryland. I don't remember if it was the Cole Fieldhouse. It was one of the places there where we actually had a record hop.
Well, they had a couple of those, but you know, the first time they tried something like that in '58, it didn't. It was met with resistance. It was a different time, and then things changed in the late '60s on the Maryland campus. Anybody else have anything?
Did Turner's Arena ever have any live entertainment?
Yeah, Turner's Arena was great. It was a professional wrestling arena. I have the whole history on that from the time it was
Jimmy
built.
Dean had a show there.
People don't realize it was an orchestra house. The first time Frank Sinatra ever performed in Washington, D.C., he was singing lead with the Tommy Dorsey Orchestra, and they performed at Turner's Arena, which was at 1341 W Street at the corner of 14th and W. They then started booking like Duke Ellington and some jazz guys, and they went back and forth. And then in the late 50s, they brought in the country music jamborees. They actually filmed Town and Country Time, the Jimmy Dean Show.
What quadrant of the city is it now? You're not talking northwest.
It's no longer standing. It was at the corner of 14th and W Northwest.
Northwest, okay.
It was actually the front of it. It was a converted garage, and it seated 1,800 people.
Wow, is there anything like that there now? That's all residential.
There's now a hotel sits on its site.
Okay.
So is that where Elvis sat on the hay bale with Jimmy for the non-performing appearance on the show?
It probably was, but I don't know that for certain.
Before the Wilson line did. Yeah.
But Turner's Arena, they did the Friday and Saturday night country shows there. Roy Clark and Jimmy Dean, all those guys would go down and play. And that was a wrestling arena, and it went out of business in the '60s, and then it was torn down shortly after that.
But the Channel 5 wrestling was Uline Arena, right? With National Bohemian Beer as a sponsor.
Originally it was Turner's Arena.
First, yeah.
It was Turner's, and then they very briefly went to Washington Coliseum.
Okay. My dad had that thing on all the time.
Anything else? Anything about the nightclubs, rock and roll bands?
Food for thought. When did that out?
That was my last thing.
Out of my era. That's as far as I'm concerned. The culture dried up after 1976.
That was the last bastion. Even
I can't get
Psychedelics.
I mean, I'm interested in anything from '76 to the present. There's just nothing. It wasn't, to me, my
I thought
opinion.
it opened in '66, though.
Food for thought?
Yeah.
I never saw references to it till the 80s. You
That's
know,
all, that's.
Yeah, the Vietnam War ended in '75.
I mean, it's just,
Yeah.
well, you know, everything changed in '76. The teen club scene died.
I love
They
that place.
exterminated it. You had punk rock come in, which wasn't musical at all. And, you know, things just changed. You had disco come in. And the nightclubs
Disco's
changed.
what
It was
drove
just-
all the real freaks and beats up to Food for Thought.
By '76, all the great old bars and taverns in Southeast DC had all been knocked down or reopened to something else. So, yeah, my whole interest is before '76. It just cuts off after that.
There was the psychedelic circuit, DC Space, Washington Project for the Arts, places like that.
Yeah, I mean, there were interesting places, but you know, you had a whole different scene emerge, and then you know, well, in '81 you had the 930 Club, and
1981? Is that when it started?
I believe it was
That was
1981.
Atlantis.
It had been the
first.
Atlantis.
Yeah, the Frogs played there, I think.
Raz used to play there a lot, and then it turned to the 930 Club.
The DC Space
Grateful
was up
Dead
the
ever
street.
play
Yeah.
in DC? Or like back then? Or no?
In the '60s they did. They played at Cole Fieldhouse, and they played a couple places around town. They played at Cole Fieldhouse on the Maryland campus. And then that's the night where they all went out to the Crossroads to see Roy Buchanan play late that evening. I remember that.
But
Jerry-
Raz?
No. The Grateful Dead played at the Cole Fieldhouse in like '70 or '71, and that night Jerry Garcia and the whole band went to see Roy Buchanan play at the Crossroads. They hung out.
October 23rd of '70, they played McDonough.
They played. It was when they played Cole Fieldhouse. Yeah, I have the date. I don't know what it is.
Amazing what you can do.
That was my birthday 2 days before, that's why.
Anything else? Anybody want to throw anything out? Seems like we could do a talk just on the DC nightclubs alone, but I'd have to bone up for that one. It would take hours and hours. Yes. Jeff?
What was the
Those were the
first
good old
concert at the Alexandria Roller Rink?
Okay. What type of music?
And
Rock and roll?
Yeah.
In the Lizard King book, my Jim Morrison biography, I give the whole history of the Alexandria Roller Rink, when it was built and all that. And they actually did a couple country music shows way back in the 50s. I think it goes back to '53 at least. I think the place was built in 1948, but it was sporadic. And the first rock and roll show that I found was Peter and Gordon in 1964, and then they did the Beach Boys. So it started at that time, '64 with rock and roll, but some country music shows went back to the '50s. And then I think the last show ever at the Alexandria Roller Rink was it the Lou Reed concert?
I was at that, but I think you found,
I
Lou
found-
Reed and Hall & Oates played in '74, and you found Judas Priest.
No, I found the really weird one. There were two shows I never knew existed there.
Several.
It was
You did pictures of that.
Ted Nugent,
Oh.
and I forget who.
Was it Amboy Dukes or Ted Nugent?
I think it was Ted Nugent and Amboy Dukes, and I forget who was with them. And the other one was Rory Gallagher and Status Quo.
Oh, yeah.
Which was just bizarre. But I think Lou Reed, Hall & Oates, and Lou
That was the
Reed
last one I
was the
went
last one.
I picked up a hippie chick from Fort Reno Park, man, and we went to that.
That was '74. Yeah, so that
That's
was-
true. Real nice girl, too. Used to see her at DC Space later on. She wouldn't acknowledge me.
I wonder why.